My name is Samuel Hayes. I'm 37, and I've spent over a decade building a private equity empire in Denver, Colorado. For 12 years, I've thrived on staying in the shadows, acquiring companies, investing through hidden trusts, using a complex network of shell corporations so intricate that even seasoned attorneys take months to trace anything back to me. I prefer it that way, silent, untouchable, effective. But in this moment, standing in my father-in-law's designer kitchen while he flailed his coffee mug around like a conductor orchestrating an insult symphony, I didn't feel powerful at all. For 3 years now, Robert Kellerman had called me useless at every opportunity, during holidays, over dinner, even when I was barely through his front door. She could have married Dr. Patterson's boy, he said, motioning to Elena, my wife. But no, she chose you, someone who refuses to explain what he actually does. Elena sat at the table, silently pushing scrambled eggs across her plate like they held the secrets to our fractured marriage. Her eyes never left her dish. "He works in finance, Dad," she muttered, still avoiding my gaze. "Finance?" Robert snorted. "That could mean anything. For all we know, he's hawking retirement plans in a strip mall." He continued circling the granite island like a shark, growing redder with each insult. This was Robert Kellerman, CEO and founder of Nexera Labs, a floundering biotech firm that hadn't posted meaningful profit in years. He had inherited his wealth from a family construction empire and fancied himself a master strategist. What he didn't realize was that I had been monitoring his firm's financials for the better part of 8 months. Nexera Labs was on life support, burning through cash, bleeding out what little venture capital remained. They were desperate, and what they needed was precisely what I specialized in: anonymous lifelines. "You just sit there mute," Robert barked, jabbing a finger in my direction. "A real man defends himself." I met his glare and nodded. "You're absolutely right, Mr. Kellerman." The room stilled. Elena finally glanced up, confusion flickering across her face. Even Robert seemed momentarily thrown. "I am?" he asked, his voice faltering. "Completely," I said, rising and grabbing my jacket. "Elena deserves better." I walked toward the door, every step echoing in the silence behind me. Just as my hand closed around the doorknob, I heard her chair scrape against the floor. "Samuel, wait!" But I was already outside, the chill of November air sharp against my skin, a bitter reminder that everything was about to shift. I first met Elena 5 years ago at a biotech conference in Boulder. She was showcasing her research in gene therapy, intelligent, passionate, and clearly driven. I was attending to evaluate emerging trends in medical tech for potential investment. Falling for her had not been part of the plan. Our romance moved fast, probably too fast. Within 18 months, we were married in a quiet ceremony that Robert criticized endlessly. He had wanted a lavish celebration, one that would impress his elite social circle. But Elena and I had opted for intimacy and simplicity, or so I thought. The tension began during our first Christmas together. Robert had been drinking and began probing about my work. I offered my usual vague description: private investments, portfolio advising, financial consulting. Technically accurate, just without the part where I was the one holding the portfolios. My firm, Amberlin Ventures, managed more than $200 million in assets. We focused on early-stage ventures in tech and healthcare, high-stakes deals that required confidentiality and clean exits. I built my reputation by staying invisible, letting others take the spotlight while I reaped the rewards quietly behind the scenes. But Robert saw my silence not as caution, but as weakness. The jabs grew sharper as time went on. He'd mock my wardrobe, scoff at my vehicle, question my ambition. He'd compare me to their friends, surgeons, attorneys, men who flaunted their success like peacocks. What stung more than his cruelty was watching Elena shrink during these exchanges. The confident researcher I fell in love with began retreating, making excuses for his outbursts, whispering apologies afterward, always promising it would improve. But she never once challenged him, never raised her voice to defend me. Then, 3 months ago, I stumbled on something that changed the equation. While evaluating prospects for a new investment fund, I came across Nexera Labs. Their financials were a disaster, spending wildly with minimal returns. They'd been turned away by almost every investor they approached. The risk profile was too high, the books too thin. That's when I realized I had two choices: rescue Robert's firm anonymously or let it implode. The business strategist in me recognized the potential upside, but the husband, the son-in-law, saw something else entirely. I began my due diligence, masking my identity beneath layers of legal insulation. If I invested, Robert would never know I was his white knight, the man he constantly humiliated at his own dinner table. 3 weeks ago, I hit my breaking point. It was Elena's birthday, and Robert had invited his brother-in-law Harold, a heart surgeon who loved bragging about his Aspen property. "Harold just got a new yacht," Robert announced as Elena sliced the cake. 40 feet long. Cost more than most people make in half a decade. Harold laughed, patting me on the back. "How about you, Samuel? Any new toys? A house? A new ride?" I should have anticipated it. Robert's eyes lit up, savoring the chance to land another blow. "Samuel's not one for flashy purchases," he said, voice thick with fake kindness. "More of a sensible type, right, Samuel?" Under the table, Elena gave my hand a gentle squeeze, a silent plea to stay composed. But Robert wasn't finished. "Let's be real. My daughter is a top-tier scientist, published globally, keynote speaker at medical summits. She could have had her pick: a surgeon, a litigator, someone with real standing. But instead, he waved his hand vaguely toward me. Well, we all slip up sometimes." The room froze. Elena's grip loosened. Harold stared at his cake like it held secrets of the universe. And Robert, he leaned back, smiling like he just delivered a masterstroke. I turned and looked at Elena, really looked. Her face was flushed, eyes lowered, shame visible. But not for her father's viciousness, no. She was embarrassed for me. Embarrassed that I wasn't the man her father wanted for her. And in that moment it hit me. This wouldn't change. Elena wouldn't defend me because, deep down, she didn't fully disagree. Maybe she didn't say the words, but her silence screamed them. I stood, folded my napkin with calm precision, and fixed my eyes on Robert. "You're absolutely right," I replied calmly. "She truly does deserve someone better." I leaned down, gently kissed Elena on the forehead, slipped into my coat, and walked out the door. I could hear her voice calling my name behind me, but I didn't pause. I had more important things to take care of. The drive back gave me time to reflect. 4 months, I'd been preparing a $15 million investment package for Nexra Labs, a deal that would not only rescue Robert's sinking company, but also secure his financial future. Everything was ready. All that remained was my signature. I parked in my driveway and stayed in the car for 10 quiet minutes. By the end of that silence, I'd made up my mind. I wasn't going to sign it. In fact, I had something far more gratifying in store. I would let Robert Kellerman experience what it felt like to be at the mercy of someone he believed had no value. The next morning, I phoned my attorney, James Morrison, and gave him instructions to prepare 3 documents: a formal notice withdrawing interest in Nexra Labs, a termination letter voiding the pending funding agreement, and a release from confidentiality that would legally permit me to reveal my identity as the investor behind the curtain. "Are you certain about this, Samuel?" James asked as we sat in his office. "You've spent months doing the groundwork. The numbers look solid, even with the complicated family dynamics." "I'm sure," I said. "Sometimes the smartest move is walking away." By noon, I had everything signed and sealed. James was scheduled to deliver the termination paperwork to Nexra Labs the next morning at 10 a.m. sharp. I wanted Robert to spend an entire day spiraling before he figured out what had hit him. That evening, Elena came home around 8. She had been staying at her sister's since the birthday incident, and from the red in her eyes and the slump in her shoulders, I could tell she'd been crying. "We need to talk," she said softly, lowering herself into the armchair across from me. "All right," I said, waiting. "My dad called today. He's feeling like he might have gone too far the other night." I nearly chuckled. "He's feeling remorseful. He wants to apologize. He suggested we go to dinner this weekend. Just the 3 of us. Try to make a fresh start." I studied her expression, searching for any indication that she understood what had actually happened. But she didn't. Elena still thought this was about hurt feelings, an emotional bruise that could be mended with a polite apology. "Elena," I said carefully, "how long have you been embarrassed to be with me?" Her brows pulled together. "What? I'm not ashamed of you. You've never once asked your father to stop disrespecting me. Not once in 3 years. He doesn't mean it. He's just protective. He called me garbage. In front of everyone. You said nothing. Tears welled in her eyes. I didn't know how to respond. He gets so defensive when challenged. So you chose his comfort over my dignity. That's not fair. But it was. We both knew it. Elena had made her decision a long time ago. Every time she said nothing, every time she softened his cruelty with excuses, she chose him over me. I love you, she said, and somehow that only deepened the ache. I know, I answered, but love alone isn't enough if you won't defend it. She left an hour later, and deep down, I knew she wouldn't be coming back. Even if we stayed legally married, even if therapy patched over the surface cracks, part of her would always view me through her father's judgmental lens. The following morning, I arrived at my office early and waited. At exactly 10 a.m., I called James to confirm delivery. Done, he said. It's in their hands now. 20 minutes later, my phone lit up. Samuel. Elena's voice trembled. Something happened. My dad's company just lost their primary investor, $15 million. He's falling apart. I'm sorry to hear that, I said flatly. The attorneys won't tell him who backed out. All they said was that it was an anonymous group, and now there are legal issues about confidentiality. He's talking about bankruptcy. I didn't say a word. I just listened to the uneven rhythm of her breathing. Samuel, I know you have contacts in finance. Do you think maybe you could look into it? Ask around. Find out who this group is. The irony was so thick I could barely suppress a smile. She was begging me to help track down the investor who disappeared, completely unaware that I was that very person. I'll see what I can find, I said. After the call ended, I typed up 2 messages and scheduled them for delivery the next morning. One was addressed to Elena, the other to Robert. Both would hit their phones at exactly 10 a.m., alongside a formal message from James Morrison's office. By midday tomorrow, they would all know who they had been underestimating. Later that night, I pulled up Nexera Labs files one last time and combed through them. Everything I had suspected about Robert's leadership was confirmed. The company had been leaking money for a year and a half, ever since a disastrous product rollout that he had insisted on greenlighting, despite direct warnings from his research team. He had dismissed expert analysis and gambled on a hunch. That decision had cost Nexera their deals with 2 major pharmaceutical giants and nearly $3 million in sunk costs. Rather than accept responsibility, Robert shifted blame onto the scientists. He fired 3 senior researchers and began begging new investors to rescue the company from collapse. What made it worse? Elena had been one of the scientists who advised against the launch. She had submitted a detailed report explaining why the drug wasn't ready for the market. Robert ignored it, brushed her off as an overly cautious academic, and steamrolled ahead. When the failure unfolded exactly as she had predicted, he turned on her too. Made her work life unbearable until she left and found employment at a smaller, more principled firm. Elena had never told me the full truth. She downplayed it, saying there had been some disagreements. She made it sound like 2 professionals who simply saw things differently, not the career sabotage it truly was. I picked up my phone and called Dr. Patricia Webb, one of Elena's former colleagues who had also left Nexera around the same time. Patricia, it's Samuel Hayes, Elena's husband. I hope it's all right that I'm calling. Samuel? Of course. How's Elena? She's doing okay. I'm actually reaching out for a different reason. I've been reviewing Nexera Labs for a potential investment. I was hoping you could share your thoughts on their R&D credibility. There was a pause on the line. Samuel, can I be candid? Please. Robert Kellerman is a nightmare. The research team is top tier. The science is sound. But Robert? He runs the company like a dictator with a god complex. He disrespects his team, ignores data, and makes decisions purely to serve his ego. Any examples? The neurotropin release. We had over 6 months of internal data showing the compound wasn't stable. Elena even submitted a 20-page report outlining exactly why it would flop. Robert dismissed her, forced the release anyway, and burned through nearly $3 million when the FDA shut it down. And Elena? He blamed her, called her disloyal, sabotaged her until she had no choice but to leave. It was disgusting. She's one of the most talented people I've worked with. What he did to her, it was unforgivable. After we ended the call, I sat in my office in silence, staring at the ceiling until well past midnight. Robert hadn't just insulted me over family dinners. He'd crushed his own daughter's professional future because she dared to tell him the truth. And the $15 million I had nearly handed over? It wouldn't have saved a company worth saving. It would have rewarded a man who had spent years abusing power, silencing brilliance, and ridiculing the very people trying to help him to. It would have reinforced his belief that he was always right, even when the outcome proved him disastrously wrong. But more than that, it would have allowed Elena to avoid making a choice between loyalty to her father and devotion to her husband. She could have continued maintaining both relationships, never having to confront the truth that she had stood by while her father dismantled my dignity. But that moment was gone. Now, she would have to decide. And everything I knew about Robert Kellerman told me exactly what choice she'd make. The next morning, I arrived at my office before sunrise and gave the withdrawal documents one final look. All was in place. James would deliver the official termination to Nexera Labs at precisely 10 a.m., and at that same moment, the text messages I'd scheduled would reach both Elena and Robert. At 9:45, I called Elena. "Samuel, is everything okay? I need to tell you something important. Please sit down. You're scaring me." I'm the anonymous investor who pulled out of Nexera Labs. There was silence. Heavy, stunned silence that lasted nearly half a minute. "What?" "My firm, Amberlin Ventures, had committed to a $15 million investment in your father's company. I withdrew it yesterday." "That can't be true. You're in portfolio management. You don't have that kind of capital." "Elena, I own Amberlin Ventures. We oversee more than $200 million in assets. I've been the investor your father's been trying to secure for the past 8 months." I could hear her breathing, shallow and fast. "This is a joke, right? Check your phone. You'll get a text message in exactly 12 minutes. So will your father. It confirms everything I've just told you. Why would you hide this from me? If you had that kind of influence, why didn't you say something?" "Because I didn't need you to know. And I wanted to see how your family would treat someone they assumed was beneath them. So this was just a test?" "No, Elena. It was supposed to be a legitimate investment, until your father humiliated me in front of your entire family, and you stood there without saying a word." She began crying. "I should have stood up for you. I know that. But Samuel, this is my father's entire livelihood. His company. You can't do this just because you're angry. This isn't about anger. It's about respect and the consequences of refusing to show it. Please, please don't go through with this. I'll talk to him. I'll get him to apologize." It's too late for apologies. At 10 a.m. on the dot, I got the delivery confirmation. My phone buzzed. So did Elena's. "Oh my God," she whispered. "Samuel, please. I'm begging you. Don't ruin my father. I'm not ruining him. I'm just refusing to bail him out. He can face the outcome of his own decisions. This is cruel. What's cruel is watching your husband be demeaned for 3 years and never once defending him." She hung up. 5 minutes later, my phone rang again. This time it was Robert. He was already yelling. "You bastard. You think this is funny? You think you can sabotage everything I've built just because I hurt your pride? Mr. Kellerman, I think you've misunderstood. I understand perfectly. Elena told me everything. You're the one who pulled out." "That's right. 23 people work for me, Samuel. Their families rely on this company. You're willing to destroy all of them over some petty vendetta." "No. I'm choosing not to fund a company that, on its own merits, is failing. I'm not responsible for your collapse. We had a deal. We had a preliminary agreement. Nothing signed. No breach. No law broken." For the first time, he paused. And when he spoke again, his voice was thinner, more fragile. "What do you want?" "Money. An apology. I want you to know what it feels like to need someone you've decided isn't worth anything." I ended the call and powered down my phone. It was finished. 3 days later, Elena filed for divorce. She came to the house while I was gone, took her belongings, and left a letter on the kitchen counter. 2 pages, but the essence was simple. She couldn't stay married to someone who would intentionally hurt her family. What she didn't mention was that she'd also severed ties with her father. I learned from Patricia Webb, who'd heard from a former Nexera Labs employee, that Elena had confronted Robert after our final conversation. She demanded to know why he treated me with such contempt, and when he tried to justify it, she told him exactly what she thought about his leadership, his abuse of power, and the way he had destroyed both her career and her marriage. She left that day and never looked back. Robert called her 17 times afterward. She didn't answer once. Within a week, the biotech community was buzzing with news of Nexera Labs' sudden instability. 2 other investors dropped out, concerned about the firm's growing debt and the abrupt exit of its main backer. Robert laid off 8 employees and shut down one of the company's research facilities. A local business journal published an exposé highlighting Nexera's problems, including several anonymous sources who described a toxic work environment and leadership failures. Robert refused to comment. By the end of the month, he was selling assets, his home, his vacation property, even his country club membership, to keep the company afloat. One afternoon, I drove past his house and saw him in the yard, pulling weeds from what used to be a professionally maintained garden. He looked smaller, older. A man out of excuses. 6 months later, Nexera Labs declared bankruptcy. A few of its research patents were acquired, but the company ceased operations. Robert took a consulting role with a larger firm, working from a cramped office in a strip mall near the airport, the kind of place he used to mock. Elena never reached out. Through mutual friends, I heard she'd taken a position at a California research institute. She was thriving, publishing again, speaking at conferences, rebuilding her reputation. She found her voice in the lab, even if she never found it in our marriage. I sold the house in Denver and relocated to Portland, where I opened a new Amberlin Ventures office. The change was good. The Pacific Northwest had a dynamic tech scene with fresh opportunities. Robert never contacted me again, but I didn't need him to. The industry publications kept me updated. Every failed pitch, every investor that passed, every whisper about his reputation. He'd learned what it meant to be dismissed, to be ignored, to feel disposable in a room where others held the power. He finally understood that respect isn't automatic. It's earned, especially in how you treat people who can't fight back. Sometimes, the greatest justice is letting someone face the consequences of their own character. And sometimes, the person you thought was irrelevant turns out to be the one holding all the cards.